Good evening, aspirants. This is the introductory session to social justice and governance. Social justice and governance is an integral part to general studies too. Along with this subject, we have Indian polity and constitution and international relations. When you analyze the pattern of questions which have been asked previously in UPSC mains examination from social justice and governance, you will realize on an average every year 4 to 6 questions are part of social justice and governance. In 2025, there were around 6 questions which were asked from this particular subject. In terms of marks, अगर आप देखोगे तो around 80 to 100 marks is carried by just a single subject of social justice and governance, followed by other subjects which too are part of general studies paper. Ab, when you analyze social justice and governance, the questions which are asked from this particular subjects have a repeated theme. Indian polity and constitution, along with international relations, are very dynamic in nature. However, when you analyze social justice and governance, there are certain topics which are consecutively asked by UPSC. There are regular questions on topics like vulnerable section, development and development process, development industries, civil society organization, NGO. And thus, because of this repeated nature of themes, although context can vary, but the topics are often repeated. And this becomes a strong point with respect to this subject, because if the themes are getting repeated, we can plan certain structure before actual examination. This can save your time. This can create a well-planned structure before the examination, and thus it can save a lot of time. And that saved time could be utilized for other subjects like polity, constitution, and international relations. Right. Along with this, अब आप social justice and governance को देखोगे ना, तो there are certain chapters. We have several chapters जिनके बारे में हम आगे डिस्कस करने वाले हैं कि कैसे प्रोसीड किया जाता है with respect to this particular subject. This subject, it is not just important for general studies paper 2. Along with this, the things, the basic aspect which you study within this particular subject can play a very important role in creating a strong base for certain essay topics, along with paper 4, that is ethics, integrity. And having a strong base over social justice and governance, along with integration of current affair and integration of facts, examples, and case studies, creates an administrative mindset. And this administrative mindset is important if you want to become a civil servant. And thus, social justice and governance plays a very, very important role for means examination. Ab now, आज का task is, because it is an introductory session, and hence हम briefly समझेंगे कि कौन कौन से chapters are integral part of social justice and governance. And क्यों it is important कि ये subject has been added by UPSC, है ना? Right. There are two aspects. One is social justice and another is governance. The subject of social justice has been added primarily because there would be prevailing injustice within the society. है ना? इतना तो हम समझ सकते हैं कि अगर we are studying about social justice, we want to study about social justice, in that case, कुछ तो injustice is prevailing within the society. And now, ये जो injustice की हम बात कर रहे हैं, ये injustice has historical background And in present circumstances, this injustice still exists in certain forms. जैसे हम बात कर सकते हैं एंशिएंट कॉन्टेक्स्ट में वी हैड कास्ट सिस्टम लीडिंग टू कास्ट डिस्क्रिमिनेशन. वी हैड such a norms which discriminated against a particular section on the basis of gender. That is, मैं बात कर रहा हूं women section of Indian society. So in this manner, we had certain sections which were discriminated in the past, and ये discrimination still continues, whether it is women section, whether it is lower caste section, whether it is LGBTQ section, whether it is scheduled tribes का section. In this manner, we have a section of society which is being exploited. It was exploited in the past, it is exploited in the present circumstances, and along with exploitation, discrimination, exclusion too are part associated with certain sections of Indian society. तो अब आपको ये समझ में आ गया होगा कि यार there exists certain problem within the society. तो अगर प्रॉब्लम है तो क्यों इट मैटर्स फॉर अ सोसाइटी टू रिजॉल्व सच सोशल इविल्स? सोचने वाली बात है. यहां पे वी नीड टू टेक इनटू कंसिडरेशन कि पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस वी गेव टू आवरसेल्फ अ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन which is built on the principle of democracy, a constitution which explicitly mentions numerous times that we need to establish a just, equitable, fair society, a society which is based on equality, a society which is based on liberty, a society which is based on justice. And hence, to fulfill the constitutional aim and objective, it is imperative upon a society to ensure the vulnerable section, those sections which had been discriminated in the past, which have been discriminated, which are the discrimination which still continues, needs to eliminate all forms of discrimination and exclusion, and we need to work towards inclusive society. Because if we believe in democracy, in that case, we need to build a society which is based on a principle of justice. इसीलिए social justice plays a very important role in our UPSC. Right. अब ये social injustice which prevailed in the past, ये social injustice which is present in contemporary times, it lead to creation of vulnerability. And hence, in this particular subject, we have a chapter called Vulnerable Section of Society. As I have already said, there are certain sections which historically faced disadvantage, chahe it is women, chahe it was lower caste communities. And in the present context, we have informal workers which are considered to be vulnerable, because informal workers, for example, gig workers, they lack social security, they lack insurance, they lack retirement benefits, and hence they are exposed to certain economic vulnerabilities. Along with this, we have street vendor. We saw during COVID-19 कि कैसे street vendors, domestic workers were affected due to pandemic, and hence these are groups which are vulnerable to certain shocks and events which a society can face any time. So history में हमारे पास there were certain sections. It was on the basis of caste, it was on the basis of gender, it was on the basis of race, it was on the basis of language, कि there were discrimination which persisted within the society. आज के समय पे ये vulnerability among the section of society has increased multifold. It can be due to uncertainties within economies. It can be due to environmental factor, to climate crisis, disaster. It is creating an undue pressure on a section of population. This undue pressure ultimately results into a section being prone to vulnerability. इसीलिए ये वल्नरेबल सेक्शन को भी स्टडी, है ना. जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल लेट्स टेक अ केस ऑफ विमेन. आप आज प्रेजेंट सर्कमस्टांसेस, हिस्टोरिकल इवेंट्स छोड़ो, हिस्ट्री में जो डिस्क्रिमिनेशन बिकॉज ऑफ पेट्रियार्कल माइंडसेट जो एग्जिस्ट करता था, लीव असाइड दैट एस्पेक्ट. आज के सर्कमस्टांसेस में यू नीड टू टेक इनटू कंसिडरेशन ब्रॉड पर्सपेक्टिव जब हम विमेन की बात करते हैं. जैसे देयर पॉलिटिकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन, लोकसभा में देयर रिप्रेजेंटेशन इज अराउंड 14%. Although they represent around 50% of Indian population, yet their representation into parliament, or to be specific in Lok Sabha, it is 14%. You can take into consideration the education या literacy gap between male and female. You can take into consideration the wage gap which exists between male and female. You can take into consideration the sex ratio at birth, which is around 918 per 1000 male. It clearly resembles कि society has preference towards male, and this male preference ultimately creates a disadvantageous situation for women's section, and thus their equal participation, their equal representation remains a dream. And this is just a one section which I'm talking about, which faces vulnerability. ऐसे multiple sections of Indian society on various basis they face exclusion and discrimination, and hence they are vulnerable. And जैसे मैंने बोला था, अगर हम कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, हमारे पास कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है which believes in equality and justice, in that case we need to ensure social justice exists within the society. And to ensure social justice exists within the society, we need to eliminate all kind of vulnerability from the society. Each and every section of Indian society need to be given equal representation, need to be given equal opportunity, need to create a level playing field so that they can contribute towards the national development. है ना. तो अभी तक हमने देखा कि we started with social justice. And primarily social justice need to be ensured for vulnerable section. And vulnerable sections, women section, lower caste community, children's, old age, etc. And why social justice? It is primarily because constitution and democracy. These are the two aspects which is integral part of our society, and to fulfill this objective of democracy and equal participation of all, we need to ensure social justice persists within the society. We need to eliminate all kind of vulnerability which is associated with any section of Indian society, so as to ensure social justice is prevailing within India. So अब ये क्वेश्चन आता है कि कैसे we can ensure कि vulnerability can be removed from the society and we can ensure equal participation from all. इसीलिए we have the third chapter, which is development process, development industry. है ना. हम यहां पे ग्रोथ वर्ड नहीं यूज कर रहे हैं. वी आर प्राइमरली यूजिंग द वर्ड डेवलपमेंट. डेवलपमेंट इज अ क्वालिटेटिव चेंज. जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल इन जनरल मैं एक पॉइंट कहता हूं, जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल ग्रोथ इज मोर इन क्वांटिटेटिव एस्पेक्ट वाइल डेवलपमेंट इज मोर इन क्वालिटेटिव एस्पेक्ट. ग्रोथ वाला बोलेगा कि यार वी शुड हैव दिस मच लिटरेसी इन अ सोसाइटी. इट विल कोट अ नंबर. वाइल जब डेवलपमेंट वाला होगा तो वो डेवलपमेंट वाला बोलेगा वी नीड टू हैव सर्टेन लर्निंग आउटकम. है ना. ग्रोथ वाला बोलेगा कि यार इतनी लिटरेसी नीड्स टू बी एग्जिस्टिंग विद इन द सोसाइटी. डेवलपमेंट वाला बोलेगा कि वी नीड टू हैव स्किल डेवलपमेंट अलोंग विथ लिटरेसी. सो डेवलपमेंट word is a wide concept and it is much qualitative in nature. and it encompasses social aspect, political aspect, economic aspect, environmental aspect. Multiple dimensions can be taken into consideration for development. क्यों हम डेवलपमेंट की इतनी बात करते हैं? क्यों क्यों देयर इज अ रीजन बिहाइंड इट. आप ये देखो कि व्हेन ब्रिटिशर्स लेफ्ट इंडिया, है ना, तो द सिचुएशन, द सोशल सिचुएशन ऑफ इंडिया वाज कि मोर देन 70% ऑफ पॉपुलेशन वाज लिविंग इन पॉवर्टी. Only around 10% of population was literate. We were facing agricultural distress, landlessness among Indian population, excessive pressure on agriculture, and total destruction of manufacturing by Britishers. क्यों Britishers ने क्या किया? Primarily उनकी thought process was कि India was made a mere exporter of raw material, and while India imported finished goods from Britain because they had industrial revolution in England. So India was just used as a market and thereby destroying India's manufacturing completely. वो nation which contributed 25% of manufacturing output before Britishers came to India. Manufacturing sector was completely destroyed. And thereafter independence, हमने multiple steps लिए, whether it was infrastructure development program, whether it was green revolution, whether it was industrial policy, whether it was bringing land reforms, with the thought process of bringing development within the society. क्यों? क्योंकि we wanted to uplift our Indian population, which were completely exploited by Britishers when they ruled India. And hence, it became an obligation on government of free India to work on developmental parameters simultaneously in various fields, whether it was social field, whether it was political field, whether it was economic field, and etc. Right. So, अब ये development could ensure कि vulnerability from a section could be removed, and continuously we made effort in this regard. राइट. अब ये डेवलपमेंट को अचीव करने के लिए वी नीड टू हैव अ पर्टिकुलर प्रोसेस. जैसे जैसे लेट्स टेक टू कॉन्ट्राडिक्टरी एग्जांपल्स. वन, वी हैड मैनुअल स्कैवेंजिंग एक्ट which came in 2013. The aim of manual scavenging act was to eliminate this profession and rehabilitation of manual scavengers. Right? This was broad aim and objective associated with Manual Scavenging Act. Basically, government wanted to provide a dignified labor to manual scavengers who were working in an indignified profession. Obviously, in a modern society, carrying a human waste is definitely an indignified job. However, आज भी, according to government report, we have 58 to 60,000 manual scavengers, registered manual scavengers. And thus, the target which was set in 2013 through Manual Scavenger Act, शायद हम लोग अचीव नहीं कर पाए. शायद नहीं, it is definitely we are unable to achieve it. And hence, the vulnerability associated with manual scavengers हम पूरी तरीके से निकाल नहीं पाए. While दूसरी तरफ we have a classic case of Swachh Bharat Mission. We all know the situation of India with respect to open defecation before Swachh Bharat Mission, and by 2020 we were almost able to provide toilets in every village, in every household by 2020. So it is very interesting case study जिससे ये पता कर सकते हैं हम कि यार what happened कि we were not able to achieve the objective which were set up in Manual Scavenging Act, while we were able to achieve the objective which were set up in स्वच्छ भारत मिशन. सो ये दोनों एग्जांपल्स में एक चीज इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. मैनुअल स्कैवेंजिंग एक्ट में प्राइमरली गवर्नमेंट वाज टेकिंग ईच एंड एवरी रिस्पांसिबिलिटी, राइट फ्रॉम पॉलिसी मेकिंग टू पॉलिसी इंप्लीमेंटेशन, मॉनिटरिंग एंड इवैल्यूएशन. वाइल स्वच्छ भारत मिशन देखोगे आप तो ये मॉडर्न एरा का मास मूवमेंट था. मास मूवमेंट आप लोगों ने पढ़ा होगा, आप लोग जानते होंगे 1920s में नॉन कोऑपरेशन मूवमेंट, 1930 में सिविल डिसोबीडियंस मूवमेंट, 1942 में क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट. दैट वाज अ मास मूवमेंट वेयर ईच एंड एवरी इंडियन पार्टिसिपेटेड. Not agar not each and every, in that case majority of Indian participated into these mass movement which was led by Mahatma Gandhi. And in the same fashion, Swachh Bharat mission became a Jan Andolan. Each and every player within the society, whether it was government, whether it was private player, whether it was civil society organization, played a very important role in bringing success to Swachh Bharat mission. In the same way, we have a classic example of polio eradication from our nation. वहां पे भी we had a mass movement, tremendous amount of participation, celebrities were being considered as an important part of this mission of polio eradication, along with private player participation, civil society organization and government. ये सब machineries were clubbed together to achieve the success, and we have achieved the success in polio eradication, or it is Swachh Bharat mission. इसका ये मतलब है कि to achieve the objectives of development, we need to have a proper process. We need to have a proper process. अगर process is not followed, in that case developmental objectives के failure होने के chances are very high. और अगर developmental objectives fail होते हैं, in that case our objective to remove vulnerability या our objective to uplift the deprived sections would not get fulfilled. अगर हमारे objectives of removing vulnerability could not get fulfilled, in that case it would affect the social justice norm of the society, which is integral part of our constitution. And hence this third chapter include this process where we need to understand कि कैसे development process need to be followed so as to achieve the objective of development. Along with this process, we have development industry. And ये development industry consists of development partners. जैसे मैंने क्या बोला था कि स्वच्छ भारत मिशन में we had various partners, government along with private organizations, along with civil society organizations, played a very impactful role in meeting the objective which were set under Swachh Bharat mission. And thus multiple players, whether it was government, whether it was private player, whether it was civil society organization, and thus these all segment are integral part of our society. They are important stakeholders of our society, and hence their participation into development process creates a positive pathway to achieve the objectives of development. Clear? Right. तो ये 3 chapters हैं which is part of social justice and governance. अब now जब ये civil society organization हमने यहाँ पे use किया है in development industry, and a separate chapter with respect to civil society organization is part of our subject. Right. Just wait. Right. We have our 4th chapter, civil society organization. And let be very clear about it कि civil society organization as a term can be modern term, but civil society organization have existed within the society since centuries. ज्यादा पीछे नहीं जाते हैं, आप ये देखो, during British rule, we had various organizations like Brahmo Samaj or Atmiya Sabha, which was started by Raja Ram Mohan Roy. उस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का एम एंड ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या था? टू रिमूव सती सिस्टम फ्रॉम इंडिया, विमेन एजुकेशन को प्रमोट करना, कास्ट डिस्क्रिमिनेशन को रिमूव करना. तो ये जो थॉट प्रोसेस थी ऑफ ब्रिंगिंग पॉजिटिव चेंजेस विद इन द सोसाइटी टू eliminate all kind of differences and discrimination which is faced by a particular section, वहां पे राजा राम मोहन रॉय की ऑर्गेनाइजेशन लाइक आत्मीय सभा और ब्रह्मो समाज एक्टेड एज अ सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. राजा राम मोहन रॉय वाज नॉट पार्ट ऑफ एनी ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट की इंस्टीट्यूशंस. इन द सेम वे सत्यशोधक समाज, सेल्फ रेस्पेक्ट मूवमेंट, ये जितने भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन हैं, दे प्लेड अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल इन ब्रिंगिंग पॉजिटिव चेंजेस. Along with this, organization like हरिजन सेवक संघ ऑफ महात्मा गांधी, ये जितने भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में नाम ले रहा हूं, दे वर वर्किंग फॉर अ पर्टिकुलर कॉज. ईदर रिमूविंग either working for women empowerment, either removing the caste differences and upliftment of lower caste communities and bringing equality within the society. And ye jo task which was being performed by these organizations can be called civil society organization. एंड वहां से लेके आज भी आप देखोगे तो देयर एग्जिस्ट मिलियन ऑफ सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस व्हिच वर्क इन वेरियस फील्ड्स. देयर आर सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस वर्किंग इन सोशल एम्पावरमेंट. There are certain civil society organizations which is working toward political empowerment. There are certain civil society organizations which are working towards economic empowerment. There are certain civil society organizations which are working for environmental empowerment, etc. And yes, civil society organization is basically a bridge between government and citizen. Right. And in a democratic setup, civil society organization represent a form of direct democracy, जहां पे people can proactively participate and bring a positive change. Let's take an example. इस समय पे बहुत फेमस हो रहा है CJP, कॉकरोच जनता पार्टी. It is basically a pressure group, and pressure group is part of civil society organization. आपने multiple non-governmental organization NGOs के बारे में सुना हो. ये NGOs are being part of civil society organization. Pressure group are part of civil society organization. Self-help groups are part of civil society organization. And hence, क्योंकि civil society organization के साथ citizens are connected and it acts as a bridge between government and citizen, and hence हमारे syllabus में civil society organization is an integral part. However, there are certain challenges to the institution. There are certain challenges which exist with this organization. There have been various blames of misusing financial resources. There have been blames that these civil society organization indulge into radicalization. So there are certain issues associated with this institution. However, they are integral part of the society, and hence reform measures needs to be taken so that civil society organization becomes more transparent, more accountable, more responsive, and can contribute directly to development process, because this development process results into elimination of vulnerability, and elimination of vulnerability ultimately results into getting social justice for the society, and getting social justice to the society ultimately fulfills our constitutional objective and democratic principles. Fulfillment of democratic principles. आप देख रहे हो कि किस तरीके से जो चैप्टर्स हैं एक दूसरे से इंटरलिंक्ड है ना. और ऑल्दो इट इज एन इंट्रोडक्टरी सेशन, स्टिल आपको एक इंसाइट मिली होगी कि मैं कुछ हिस्टोरिकल इवेंट्स को ले रहा हूं, कुछ इवेंट्स बता रहा हूं फ्रॉम मॉडर्न इंडिया, कुछ सिचुएशन को मैं ले रहा हूं फ्रॉम प्रेजेंट कॉन्टेक्स्ट. यही है ब्यूटी ऑफ दिस पर्टिकुलर सब्जेक्ट. एंड अगर आपको ये वल्नरेबल सेक्शंस पता चल गए, कैसे इनकी वल्नरेबिलिटी को रिमूव करने के लिए डेवलपमेंट प्रोसेस प्लेज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल समझ में आ गया, इन दैट केस these basic points, the datas could be easily used for other subjects as well, जो मैंने पहले कहा था आपको. Right, अब ये this is not an end, है ना. Right, along with this we have एक important chapter which is poverty and hunger. एंड इट इज वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग पॉवर्टी एंड हंगर के बारे में पढ़ना. रीजन बीइंग, it is basically an unfortunate situation. A nation which is known for food grain production, a nation which is known for exporting food grains, a nation which is known for helping other nations by supplying food grains in times of crisis, ऐसे nation में we are talking about poverty and hunger issue. And this poverty has been integral part of the society ever since the Britishers left us. जैसे थोड़ी देर पहले मैंने कहा था कि when Britishers left India, more than 70% of population was poor, and we had a great challenge of eliminating poverty from India, है ना? But 1980s आते आते भी our situation was not very good. Still we had 35 to 40% of population which was living in poverty. अब आप बोलोगे यार 40 years बीत गए and still we were talking about poverty. Yes, in this case आप राजीव गांधी जी का एक स्टेटमेंट पढ़ना. He said कि 1 रुपए अगर is being dedicated to a beneficiary, is dedicated to a deprived section, in that case before reaching 1 rupee to the desired beneficiary, बीच में 85 पैसा goes away. It represented कि उस समय पे जो गवर्नेंस सिस्टम था was very weak. We had corruption, we had maladministration, we had misgovernance. एंड इसीलिए सोशल जस्टिस के साथ भी ही स्टडी गवर्नेंस, और मैं आगे बताऊंगा भी कि गवर्नेंस कैसे एक इंपॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले करता है इन अचीविंग द ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ सोशल जस्टिस. सो पॉवर्टी, सिंस इंडिपेंडेंस वी हैड पॉवर्टी, एंड आज के समय पे अगर आप मल्टी डायमेंशनल पॉवर्टी इंडेक्स के डेटा को देखोगे, स्टिल 10 to 12% ऑफ इंडियन पॉपुलेशन इज अफेक्टेड ड्यू टू पॉवर्टी. अब ये पॉवर्टी को कैलकुलेट करने के लिए देयर आर सर्टेन अप्रोचेस. एब्सोल्यूट पॉवर्टी का कॉन्सेप्ट होता है, रिलेटिव पॉवर्टी होता है, कैपेबिलिटी अप्रोच इज टेकन इनटू कंसिडरेशन, मल्टी डायमेंशनल पॉवर्टी इंडेक्स इज टेकन इनटू कंसिडरेशन, सोशल एक्सक्लूजन अप्रोच इज टेकन इनटू कंसिडरेशन. तो देयर आर वेरियस अप्रोचेस टू स्टडी पॉवर्टी एंड स्टिल, एंड कोई भी अप्रोच हम देख लें, इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट टू नोट दैट अ कंसिडरेबल पॉपुलेशन इन इंडिया इज पुअर. And there is no evenness in distribution of poverty in India. Absolutely no. आप रिपोर्ट को अगर देखोगे तो ईस्टर्न एंड सेंट्रल पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया, वहां पे पॉवर्टी इज वेरी हाई. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, लेट्स टेक एन एग्जाम्पल ऑफ बिहार. बिहार में अराउंड 33% ऑफ पॉपुलेशन इज पुअर. वाइल जब हम वेस्टर्न इंडिया की बात करते हैं, चाहे इट इज गुजरात और महाराष्ट्र, गुजरात में 13% ऑफ पॉपुलेशन इज पुअर एंड महाराष्ट्र में इट इज 11% ऑफ पॉपुलेशन. एंड जब हम सदर्न इंडिया की बात कर लें, स्पेशली विद रिस्पेक्ट टू केरला, लेस देन 1% ऑफ पॉपुलेशन इज पुअर. इसका मतलब समझो कि देयर इज अनइवननेस इन पॉवर्टी इन इंडिया, and certain regions have performed very good in terms of removing poverty from their society, and certain states have failed to do so. And कितना इंटरेस्टिंग होगा ना टू undertake a case study जहां पे we can have a comparative analysis of Bihar and Kerala to understand क्यों बिहार में poverty rate is so high while Kerala have almost eradicated poverty from its state. And thereon we need to study कि क्या education setup रहा, क्या लिटरेसी रेट रही, पॉपुलेशन प्रेशर क्या है इन बोथ द स्टेट्स, हेल्थ केयर सर्विसेज क्या है, कैसे लैंड रिफॉर्म मेजर्स हैव बीन सक्सेसफुल इन केरला व्हाइल इट फेल्ड इन बिहार, कैसे जेंडर इंक्लूजन, वुमेन का एम्पावरमेंट, वुमेन का इंक्लूजन इनटू वेरियस सेक्टर्स ऑफ इकोनॉमी इन केरला वाज इंश्योर्ड व्हाइल वुमेन एम्पावरमेंट एंड वुमेन्स का इंक्लूजन इनटू वेरियस सेक्टर्स फेल्ड इन बिहार. है ना? सो ये सारी चीजें वी लर्न वाइल अंडरस्टैंडिंग द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ पॉवर्टी, है ना? एंड इट इज अ वेरी अनफॉर्चुनेट सिचुएशन कि वी ऑल्सो फेस एन इशू कॉल्ड इशू ऑफ हंगर. राइट? व्हाट डू वी मीन बाय हंगर? बेसिकली हंगर कैन ऑल्सो बी क्वालिटेटिव एंड क्वांटिटेटिव. लैक ऑफ फूड, है ना, it is a quantitative approach, and lack of nutrient, it is a qualitative approach. So basically the lack of food and lack of nutrition ultimately triggers a form of hunger. है ना। एंड अगर आप पढ़ोगे ग्लोबल हंगर इंडेक्स को, इन दैट केस वो रिपोर्ट कहती है विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू इंडिया, अंडर न्यूट्रिशन इज अराउंड 17% ऑफ पॉपुलेशन, child stunting is around 35%, child wasting is around 20%, and the children's which is affected by anemia, that is iron deficiency, is around 67%, and 57% of Indian women are affected due to anemia, that is iron deficiency. You can take example of infant mortality rate or maternal mortality rate in India. ये सारी चीजें to a certain extent symbolizes the prevalence of hunger in India. Whether it is acute hunger, whether it is chronic hunger, or whether it is hidden hunger. This is an unfortunate situation for India कि still we have a certain population which is affected due to hunger. And hunger result into, जैसे मैंने थोड़ी देर पहले बोला, undernourishment, stunting, wasting. And if a large section of society is being affected due to hunger and its effect, in that case, जिस चीज के लिए we are proud of, that is demographic dividend, this demographic dividend will turn into demographic disaster. And hence, for a society, it is important to eliminate all form of poverty and hunger to ensure social justice. Why we need to ensure social justice? To fulfill the constitutional objective. देख रहे हो interdisciplinary nature, है ना, हर एक चैप्टर इज इंटरकनेक्टेड विद अनदर, राइट। अब आप बोलोगे कि ठीक है सर, हमें समझ में आ गया कि देयर एग्जिस्ट वल्नरेबिलिटी, देयर एग्जिस्ट पॉवर्टी विद इन द सोसाइटी, देयर एग्जिस्ट हंगर विद इन द सोसाइटी, है ना। तो इसको एलिमिनेट करने के लिए कोई टेक्निक है? राइट। इसके लिए वी हैव अ सेपरेट चैप्टर व्हिच इज डेवलपमेंट एंड मैनेजमेंट of social sector. Development and management of social sector. बेसिकली सोशल सेक्टर क्या है, या सोशल सर्विसेज एक और टर्म इसके साथ कनेक्टेड होता है। सोशल सेक्टर और सोशल सर्विसेज प्राइमरली डील्स विथ हेल्थ, प्राइमरली डील्स विथ एजुकेशन, प्राइमरली डील्स विथ एम्प्लॉयमेंट, स्किल डेवलपमेंट, हाउसिंग, सैनिटेशन एक्सेट्रा, है ना। सो बेसिकली जब हम सोशल सेक्टर या सोशल सर्विसेज की बात करते हैं, वी आर बेसिकली टॉकिंग अबाउट सोशल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, एंड ये सोशल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर टर्म इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टर्म। इसके ऊपर अमर्त्य सेन जी ने भी एम्फसाइज किया था कि अगर हमें अपने डेवलपमेंटल गोल्स को मीट करना है, अगर हमें डेवलपमेंटल एस्पिरेशंस, एम एंड ऑब्जेक्टिव को फुलफिल करना है, इन दैट केस नेशन शुड प्रायोरिटाइज सोशल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट. That is, a nation should invest in education, a nation should invest in healthcare, a nation should invest in skill development, a nation should invest in women का inclusion, social inclusion, inclusion किसमें? In economic development. And once एक society invest in education, healthcare, etc., these social infrastructure में अगर एक society invest करती है, in that case human capability increases, the opportunities available for citizens increases. Once opportunity is available and each individual is actively participating into national development, in that case poverty and hunger जैसे issues could be eliminated. And hence हम जब डेवलपमेंट एंड मैनेजमेंट ऑफ सोशल सेक्टर की बात करते हैं, तो यहां पे यही हम बात करते हैं कि कैसे सोशल सेक्टर कैसे सोशल सेक्टर में डेवलपमेंट एंड मैनेजमेंट को हम इंड्यूस कर सकेंगे। डेवलपमेंट अगेन, जैसे थोड़ी देर पहले हमने देखा था कि इट इज पॉजिटिव चेंज, इट इज ब्रिंगिंग अ पॉजिटिव चेंज, है ना। पॉजिटिव चेंज किस में लाना है? इन सोशल सेक्टर। सोशल सेक्टर क्या था? एजुकेशन, हेल्थ, स्किल डेवलपमेंट, एम्प्लॉयमेंट, इनमें हमें पॉजिटिव चेंजेस लाने हैं, ये है डेवलपमेंटल थॉट प्रोसेस। मतलब सेटिंग अ गोल विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू एनी सोशल सेक्टर कैन बी कंसीडर्ड टू बी डेवलपमेंट, एंड कैसे इस डेवलपमेंटल गोल्स को मीट करना है, इट इज पार्ट ऑफ मैनेजमेंट स्ट्रेटेजी। जहां पे एग्जिस्टिंग ह्यूमन रिसोर्सेस, existing financial resources, existing technological resources need to be utilized so that developmental goals are met. कौन से developmental goals are met? The developmental goals associated with social infrastructure, the developmental goal associated with upliftment of social sector, social services are met. Again, फिर से वो chain, अगर social sector is getting developed, is getting managed in an efficient, effective manner, in that case, implication would be elimination of poverty and hunger. Elimination of poverty and hunger will ensure that vulnerability is getting reduced. Once vulnerability is getting reduced, we can move towards the higher objective of achieving social justice. अब ये जो डेवलपमेंट है एंड मैनेजमेंट, ये ऐसा नहीं है कि इट इज जस्ट रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ गवर्नमेंट। आप देखो, गवर्नमेंट हैज मल्टीपल रोल्स टू परफॉर्म। इट इज नॉट जस्ट कि गवर्नमेंट सिर्फ सोशल एस्पेक्ट में इट इज वर्किंग। देयर आर इश्यूज एसोसिएटेड विथ लॉ एंड ऑर्डर, issues of internal security, issues of external security, issues associated with international relations. There are issues related to disaster management, climate change. There are a number of responsibility which government has. And akele, it is next to impossible for government to achieve each and every objective of development. And hence, हमने थोड़ी देर पहले बोला था कि जो डेवलपमेंट प्रोसेस है, इसमें we need to add stakeholders. And ये stakeholders क्या है? Which are integral part of our society, whether it is private player, whether it is civil society organization, they are important stakeholders of the society, and involvement, inclusion of the stakeholders along with government can ensure कि social justice is being achieved. ये है beauty of this particular subject कि each and every term is getting interconnected. एंड आप ये सोचो कि अगर ये सारी चीजें आर गेटिंग इंटरकनेक्टेड एंड यू आर गेटिंग अ बेसिक इंफॉर्मेशन अबाउट सोसाइटी, वल्नरेबिलिटी ऑफ सोसाइटी, डेवलपमेंट, ये सारी चीजों के अगर बारे में आपको बेसिक इंफॉर्मेशन मिल रही है, अलॉन्ग विथ डेटा एंड फैक्ट, अलॉन्ग विथ केस स्टडी, अलॉन्ग विथ करंट एग्जाम्पल एसोसिएटेड विद दीज टॉपिक्स, इन दैट केस इट कैन 100%, it can definitely be used in various other subject. In general studies 1, we have social issues. यहाँ के information and data and facts could be used in general studies 1 as well. If essay का topic is associated with social issue, in that case you can use this data as well. Ethics integrity में directly you can use these basic information along with integration of current affairs. इसीलिए मैंने पहले बोला था कि ये एक बार आपको पता चल जाए ना कि सोसाइटी में क्या प्रॉब्लम्स एग्जिस्ट कर रही हैं, कौन सा सेक्शन इज कंसीडर्ड टू बी वल्नरेबल, इनकी वल्नरेबिलिटी कैसे रिमूव करना है, और वल्नरेबिलिटी रिमूव क्यों करना है, अलॉन्ग विथ वल्नरेबिलिटी कैसे रिमूव होगी, कैसे डेवलपमेंट के पाथवे पे इंडिया को लेके चलेंगे, कैसे इफेक्टिव क्वालिटेटिव management होगा of every resources, whether it is human resource, whether it is technological resource, whether it is financial resources. अगर हमें ये clear cut idea है, in that case we are having an administrative mindset, क्योंकि administration में जाने के बाद we need to actively work for these segment, poor and vulnerable section of society. We need to make use of limited resources which we have to bring a positive changes in these vulnerable sections. And hence, for any aspirant, learning social justice and governance gives a very good perspective of society and also inspiration to become a civil servant. Correct. तो अभी हमने जो चीज देखी प्राइमरली, जो भी चैप्टर्स हमने देखे ना, हमने सब ब्रॉडली देखा है। जब आप, ये तो इंट्रोडक्टरी सेशन था, जब हमारे क्लासेस स्टार्ट हो जाएंगे ना, हर एक टॉपिक को वी विल डील इन डेप्थनेस। मतलब एक ऐसा भी कोई ऐसा पॉइंट नहीं होगा विच आप समझ ना पाओ या जहां पे आपको क्लैरिटी ना मिल पाए। यू विल गेट क्लैरिटी ऑन ईच एंड एवरी चैप्टर विच इज बीइंग मेंशन्ड इन सोशल जस्टिस एंड गवर्नेंस। तो अभी तक हमने जो भी बात की, वेदर इट वाज एसोसिएटेड विद द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ सोशल जस्टिस, द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ सोशल जस्टिस, वेदर it was associated with vulnerable section, whether it was associated with development process and development industry, whether it was associated with civil society organization, whether the concept was related with poverty and hunger, whether the concept was associated with development and management of social sector. Primarily, they form part of social justice. Primarily they form the part of social justice. And अब it is important to understand कि अगर ये social justice को हमें achieve करना है ना, in that case जो process है, जो system है ना, it needs to be, the process and system needs to be more accountable, more transparent, more responsive, and should follow rule of law. और यहीं से फिर हम स्टार्ट करते हैं पढ़ना अबाउट गवर्नेंस, जहां पे we study each and every term associated with the process of governance, whether it is associated with accountability, whether it is associated with transparency, responsiveness, whether we study about the concept of rule of law, है ना, राइट। तो ये गवर्नेंस अल्टीमेटली प्लेज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल इन इंश्योरिंग कि सोशल जस्टिस मिलना है कि नहीं मिलना है ना। और ये गवर्नेंस को हमें कहां पे लेके जाना है, टुवर्ड्स गुड गवर्नेंस। द गवर्नेंस, द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ जो प्रोसेस एंड सिस्टम विच नीड्स टू बी फॉलो टू अचीव सोशल जस्टिस, वहां पे अगर हम टर्म यूज कर रहे हैं ऑफ अकाउंटेबिलिटी, ट्रांसपेरेंसी, रिस्पॉन्सिवनेस, रूल ऑफ लॉ, पार्टिसिपेशन ऑफ सिटीजंस into decision making process, in that case we are moving towards the concept of good governance. And ये good governance जब टेक्नोलॉजिकल इंटीग्रेशन होता है, इट लीड्स टू ई गवर्नेंस। ई गवर्नेंस इज द न्यू नॉर्मल, है ना। हम भी यहां पे ऑनलाइन इंटरैक्ट कर रहे हैं, एंड इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर गवर्नेंस टू एम्ब्रेस टेक्नोलॉजी, and to follow and to achieve and to create a pathway for e-governance. Why we need to create e-governance? Again, the reason being to achieve social justice. एंड वही मैंने बोला कि कोई भी प्रोसेस में इट इज नॉट जस्ट गवर्नमेंट जो वो काम कर सकती है, यहां पे इंक्लूजन ऑफ सिटीजन इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। इसीलिए आप देखोगे कि दो टर्म्स आर ऑल्सो इंपॉर्टेंट, सिटीजंस चार्टर एंड राइट टू इंफॉर्मेशन। अगेन दे आर इंटीग्रल पार्ट ऑफ आवर सिलेबस, है ना। एंड योर ड्रीम इज टू बिकम अ सिविल सर्वेंट। लास्ट बट नॉट द लीस्ट, ये सारी चीजें एंड होती हैं with one chapter which is called role of civil services, role of civil services in India. So just a minute. राइट, सो बेसिकली अभी तक हमने क्या चीजें देखी, हमने इंपॉर्टेंस देखा ऑफ दिस पर्टिकुलर सब्जेक्ट, है ना। एंड इंपॉर्टेंस इज नॉट जस्ट restricted to general studies, to the information which you gain by reading each and every chapter associated with this subject plays an important role आपके दूसरे जीएस के पोर्शन में भी। राइट, यहां पे इन टर्म्स ऑफ क्वेश्चन, आप क्वेश्चन एक बार एनालाइज करना, एंड ये एनालिसिस के बाद जो रिजल्ट है वो आप देखोगे कि जो थीम्स हैं आर ऑफन गेटिंग रिपीटेड, क्वेश्चन डज नॉट गेट रिपीटेड, द कॉन्टेक्स्ट गेट रिपीटेड। राइट, अब अगर वी हैव 10 to 12 chapters associated with social justice and governance, in that case we can design a basic framework. Once a basic framework has been designed, it is very important to write an answer within a stipulated time period. And agar 6 question is being asked, 4 to 6, 5 to 6 questions is being asked on a regular basis, in that case 80 to 100 marks ka question is being framed from a single chapter, from a single subject of social justice and governance. और इसके बाद फिर हम दो पार्ट में डिवाइड करते हैं, एक तरफ होगा सोशल जस्टिस और एक तरफ होगा गवर्नेंस, एंड दोनों आर इंटर रिलेटेड। सोशल जस्टिस कैन नॉट बी अचीव्ड विदाउट अ प्रॉपर गवर्नेंस स्ट्रक्चर, एंड गवर्नेंस स्ट्रक्चर में पार्टिसिपेशन ऑफ सिटीजंस इज अल्टीमेटली इंपॉर्टेंट, and social justice is important to achieve the objectives of constitution. Social justice is important to eliminate vulnerability from the society. Social justice is important so that we realizes our aim of becoming a developed nation or Viksit Bharat objective of 2047. We need social justice so that जो 50% ऑफ पॉपुलेशन, दैट इज अराउंड 50% ऑफ पॉपुलेशन, दैट इज विमेन, इनका इक्वल पार्टिसिपेशन, इक्वल रिप्रेजेंटेशन। वी नीड सोशल जस्टिस बिकॉज वो सेक्शन विच रिमेन डिप्राइव्ड, विच रिमेन एक्सक्लूडेड फॉर सेंचुरीज, उनको सोशल एम्पावरमेंट मिल जाए। वी नीड टू इंश्योर सोशल जस्टिस बिकॉज जो नए issues हैं which are being arising within the society, related with environment, related with climate, related with disaster, ये create कर रही है new vulnerability for any society, for its members, and hence government and other stakeholders need to actively take part so that social justice is ensured, है ना, so that जो हमारा proud aspect, that is 145 crore population and most of the population is youth, is young, is working, इनका effective utilization is utmost important, and effective utilization can be ensured by investing in social sector or social services. वो social sector can be health, can be education, it is skill, it is employment, etc. And simultaneously working on every aspect of society, it is important. And thus, along with economic growth, development in various sector can ensure social justice. और यही चीज हमें पढ़नी पड़ती है। मैंने ये जिस्ट बताया, हर एक चैप्टर नीड टू बी टेकन इनटू कंसिडरेशन इन डेप्थ, है ना, जहां पे हमें हर एक पॉइंट को प्रूव करना पड़ेगा, उसका हिस्टोरिकल बैकग्राउंड ट्रेस करना पड़ेगा, करंट सर्कमस्टांसेस को देखने पड़ेंगे, पॉजिटिव नेगेटिव सॉल्यूशंस, रिफॉर्म मेजर्स, कमेटी के रिकमेंडेशंस, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल नॉर्म्स को देखना पड़ेगा, गवर्नमेंट के एफर्ट्स देखने पड़ेंगे, सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के एफर्ट देखने पड़ेंगे, हर एक चैप्टर को डेप्थनेस में जाके देखना पड़ेगा। ये सिर्फ एक इंट्रोडक्टरी सेशन है, एंड हेंस सिर्फ मैंने एक जिस्ट बता दिया एसोसिएटेड विद दिस पर्टिकुलर सब्जेक्ट, है ना। तो इसी नोट पे फिर एंड करते हैं आज का सेशन, एंड जब हम सेशन को स्टार्ट करेंगे सोशल जस्टिस एंड गवर्नेंस को, तो इन दैट केस हर एक चैप्टर को इंडिविजुअली डील करेंगे। राइट, इसी नोट पे फिर एंड करते हैं सेशन। जय हिंद। हेलो, डन सर।
है ना? अच्छा लग रहा है।